Hey guys, welcome back to another video. With no further ado, let's get into the recap for week 6. So y'all back on Thursday night with the um Eagles at the Giants game. And talk about you gotta be happy for the Giants because of how much bad football they've had really since the last playoff, really since the last Super Bowl. They haven't had much success since then, and a huge win like this after getting a huge win 2 weeks ago against the Chargers. 2-4 now. Yeah, I remember a lot of people thought they were gonna go winless or get one win. They're at 2-4 and a sneaky team. I don't think they're gonna make the playoffs, but they're a sneaky team. Jackson Dart maybe is the for real deal on quarterback. He'll have some bad games like against the Saints last week, but he'll have some good games like he's had against the Chargers and Eagles. And if he continues to play this well, the Giants have a very bright future. And this is without Malik Neighbors, the Giants' top wide receiver. Cam Scottaboo looks like a steal of a draft pick. And this defense is for real deal. I just think early on, when they were giving up a lot of points, they were just more so growing together. But like the past couple of weeks, they've been playing very, very well football. The Giants are 2-4. They got the Broncos next week. With how good New York's defense is, maybe they could pull off another upset. Then they got eaten the Eagles 2 weeks from in week 8. So that'll be maybe a potential chance to be 500 for the first time since for the Eagles. This is, I was saying all along, this team was never sustainable to win so many games. And this is honestly like the 2023 season, except they're just collapsing earlier in the year. The way they won those first 4 games, it was not sustainable. Honestly, the talks of maybe AJ Brown and Devontae Smith getting traded in the offseason might end up coming true because I think the Eagles are a team that is more so run heavy. Like Saquon needs to be running the ball well to be able to help this offense grow. But when they force Hurts to be a passer, which he really cannot be as like a huge time passer like other guys are, the Eagles are not going to have success. There are a couple missed throws by Hurts. I know everybody's going to blame Kevin Patullo, which it is kind of his fault. He is scheming up these plays, but it's like the players are going out there and not executing. And this is a game against the Giants where it's like they, kind of needed this win. And the Eagles are falling apart right now. You know, everybody after the Eagles were 4-0 were saying, especially Eagles fans, were saying, oh, this team, they'll get it together, but I don't know. This is seeming more and more like that 2023 season where they just collapsed at the end because the sustainable wins, they were like the wins they were getting were not sustainable. So 4-2, they have the Vikings this week and then take on the Giants. And if they continue to lose these games and fall to 500 or even below 500, there's a real conversation that maybe Nick Sirianni should be fired. I know he's led them to 2 Super Bowls and won one, but it's like this Eagles team just isn't playing great football. And if they continue to compile these losses, how much more does this team really need to show that maybe because like really ever since 2023, like 2022 when they traded for AJ Brown, everything was good because Brown was putting up those numbers. But ever since 2023, there's been chaos on the sideline and in the locker room with Brown and Hurts and now Devontae Smith. Now mad about his targets. It's like it's going to boil over. And I'm not gonna say Philly's gonna fall apart because they have so much talent, but it's like this might be a year where it's like the Eagles realize the team they built out was never sustainable for long-term winning because of how the team is really built. Moving on, Broncos at the Jets. London, early London game, and this was not good. This was not good football. I mean, Denver's offense is very inconsistent. Bo Nix will have a good game one week, bad game next week. They are on a three-game winning streak because of this defense and how good it is. They have the Giants next week, which should be a very interesting game with how good the other New York defense is. Um, so this is a Broncos team that very inconsistent. They get the win because the Jets are just horrible and look like the worst team in the league. And my take that they were going to finish second in the division looks horrible right now, but that's for another video if we look back at some of my bad takes. Um, but hey, a win is a win. They're 4-2. They're tied for the first place in the division with the Chargers. So that's really all you can ask for the Jets. It might be time to bench Justin Fields. You know, his stats might make him seem like he's doing well, but he has not played well. And I get Denver sacked him 9 times, and they have one of the best pass rushes, but it's like outside of that week one game, it seems like ever since then, he just does not look good. Like he looks like he hasn't been the same player. I don't know if it's the concussion he suffered in week two and affecting him more than we think or what, but Jets just don't look good. And I mean, I'm not a fan of firing coaches after 1 year unless they're like Urban Meyer level bad, where it's like they deserve to be fired. But Aaron Glenn is surely on the hot seat with how bad this team's looked. Because week one, it looked like, hey, this team is going to fight. They're going to be a team that's going to keep it close. Maybe lose most of the time, but they'll win some of those games. Since then, this team has looked horrible. They have looked unwatchable for the most part. You gotta either make a QB change or fire the coach and move on to next season. We're on to the 1 o'clock slate, starting off Rams at the Ravens. LA. I mean, I was not really impressed with the Rams, and honestly, LA hasn't really been that great of a team over the past couple weeks. I know Puka Nacua got injured, um, and is most likely gonna miss next week's London game against the Jags. But like the Eagles lost, they blew that lead. It was like, you know, it was like they had the win and then kind of lost it. And then last week against the Niners, a banged up Niners team, felt like everything was right for the Rams, and then they couldn't do anything. I mean, they could do stuff, but like they let San Fran stay in the game and win the game, and then against the Ravens team, who's banged up on the entire banged up offensively, defensively, and this was a game in the first half. I mean, if Baltimore doesn't make some of those mistakes that the offense did, which it was kind of surprising to see the offense be the reason and not the defense, but they were without Lamar. Um, but LA, like you thought that like the Rams would have blown them out like the Texans did last week, but this was a close game that the Ravens could have won. That they just made some mistakes and helped LA get the win. They're 4-2. I'm not really that impressed with the Rams so far. Like they're still a playoff contender, but it's just the last couple of weeks have made me question whether they're a Super Bowl contender with some of these games where it's like they have the better talent and you think they'd go out there and dominate these teams, but they aren't. For the Ravens, the bye week is much needed. You know, maybe if the defense can play like this and when Lamar gets back after the bye, the Ravens can do something, but I'm not expecting this team to win the division. They maybe could sneak in as a wild card, with how easier the schedule eases up, but it's just at 1-5, I'm just not that confident in this Ravens team. even fully healthy, because we saw against the Bills, they were fully healthy for the most part. I know Ricardo and likely were out that game, but they were fully healthy defensively, mostly healthy offensively, and yet they somehow blew that 15-point lead. I feel like it seems like maybe the Ravens, unless they start winning games and they somehow make it back to, competing in the playoffs, this might just be a year where like they just move on to 2026 and hopefully fire this coaching staff because I don't know why Cooper Rush stayed in after the first half and how bad he looked. McDowell Huntley came in way too late. It just feels like this coaching staff is hurting this team. I know they're injured, but it's like if this team off the bye against the Bears, looks the same as it has been, and the offense is better, but not that much better. But there has to be conversations about Harbaugh being fired with how bad this team has looked and some of the coaching decisions he's made over the past couple of weeks. Moving on to the Cowboys and Panthers, and last week I did not mention Rico Dowdle, so I just want to shout out Rico Dowdle. Huge revenge game against the Cowboys. Rarely do you see players against their old teams um, kind of say it's a revenge game. They usually just say, hey, it's another game. But Dowdle straight up was all throughout the week saying, this is a revenge game. I'm getting to show them who the better running back is. And he did. He played well against a bad Cowboys defense. Bryce Young had a pretty good day. Had some huge throws late in that game to help the Panthers. And I mean, this is hopefully sustainable. Like, I hope the Panthers don't go back to like what they were earlier in the year getting blown out. Like, I hope this is more sustainable and they get these huge wins and continue to grow as a team. I mean, the defense wasn't the greatest, but made some plays late. And I hope this Panthers team can continue to get these sorts of wins where it's like the game's close and they have a chance to win it and they're able to do it. You're talking about the huge fourth down conversion where Bryce Young throws it to Hunter Renfrow to get the first down to keep that drive alive and not give Dallas the ball back. 3-3. And I mean, it's a huge win for a Panthers team that hasn't had many of these types of wins. And I gotta give credit for Dallas. I mean, this defense is gonna hold them back. The offense still had a great day. Dak, George Pickens, Devontae Williams. Jake Ferguson, they all had great games, but this defense just consistently has not stepped up and played well. And, they're 2-3-1. It's not like the season is over with, but how bad this defense has looked, it's like the Dallas might just have to hope, like, they just might have to hope Dak throws for like 400 yards and Pickens has like 200 yards a game. When CD comes back, he has 200 yards and multiple touchdowns just to have this team win game. This defense has made some plays, but I mean, I'm surprised Matty Baclus is still the coach of that defense with how bad it's looked through the first 6 weeks. You know, we'll just have to see. Colts at the Cardinals. I mean, Cardinals at the Colts. Indy 5-1, and they look, pretty impressive. This is. I mean, I thought this was going to be a blowout with how Arizona finished last week's game, and with no Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison getting a concussion. I thought Indy was going to run away with this game, but the Cardinals came it close. So shout out Arizona, but they're 5-1. Indy looks like a really perfect team. Like Daniel Jones still playing well. Jonathan Taylor may be the offensive player of the year. Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Tyler Warren, all making plays. And the offensive line is one of the best in the league. And this defense consistently is making plays. It was a little confusing pre-game with Charvarius Ward and Anthony Richardson both getting injured pre-game. Yeah, I don't know what that was about, but shout out to the Colts. 5-1. They got a huge test against the Chargers next week in LA. We'll just have to see how they perform. For the Cardinals, this is a huge way to bounce back after blowing that lead against against the Titans. Yeah, you blow that 15-point lead when you could have blown out Tennessee and fired Brian Callahan a week ago. Well, I was still talking about that in the Tennessee segment, but without your starting quarterback, without your supposed to be star wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., Jacoby Brissett played really well. This Cardinals defense made plays. I mean, they had the lead multiple times during this game, and it really looked like Arizona could pull off the upset. And he obviously came away with the win. I know people are gonna, say there was pass interference at the end of the game. You know, I didn't really see anything, but I mean, in Arizona looked better than what I thought they were. They're 2-4. They've lost four straight. It's just they're probably gonna finish. Um, they're most likely gonna finish last place with how good the other three teams are in the division. And Kyler Murray more than likely will be hopefully moved on from, and maybe Arizona can get that QB of the future and maybe start building this team into a contender. What about Seattle at Jacksonville? I mean, give credit to Sam Darnold. He has looked as good, if not better, than he did last year, as the Vikings quarterback. I mean, he had the bad game against the Niners, but it was a really good Niners defense when they had Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. And then the other loss was to a really good Bucks team where he just threw a bad pick at the end of the game. But for the most part, he's looked really good. The Seattle defense, we all know, was great. Came to play, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, I mean, he is entering top five conversations with how well he's played. Um, this Seattle team, 4-2, with the Niners losing. Now it's a three-way tie with Seattle, LA, and San Francisco. And the Seahawks, I mean, I think they could be potentially winning this division with how well Seattle has looked so far. If this offense continues to play the way it has, and the defense, which we know is going to be good, plays as well as it will be, I think this team could be a for real, not just Super Bowl contender. I mean, that's just NFC contender, but Super Bowl contender. That's what I meant to say. For Jacksonville, it's kind of a letdown. After last week's huge win against the Chiefs, you thought, hey, maybe this team is finally getting it going, and then they kind of, dropped the ball, so to say. Like, it felt like this offense went from, how well it did against the Chiefs to barely being doing anything. And, the defense did make some plays in this game to keep it close, but when the Jags 4-2, you know, Indy obviously now in first place solely at 5-1, but this Jags team is still very inconsistent. I do think as the season goes along, the offense will get better and it'll complement how good this defense is. But I am very concerned with Jacksonville with the way they win one game, but then they blow it the next game. We'll just have to see. Moving on, Chargers at the Dolphins. Um, I mean, this is why teams draft quarterbacks top five because of Justin Herbert. I mean, how well he was able to evade that sack by Jalen Phillips, throw to Ladd McConkey to get the first down and more to secure field goal range. This was close. I was a little concerned when Miami made that comeback, but I knew the better team was going to come out. The Chargers early on didn't look the greatest, but rebounded in that third quarter and really took this game out. They're 4-2, first place. It is concerning with all the injuries they have that eventually they're going to start to lose more games. But you have Justin Herbert, you have McConkey, you have all these good players that are not injured. and a huge win there for the Dolphins. I mean, just another brutal loss. You know, Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer eventually will be gone from this team, and they can be able to start fresh. But brutal loss. I mean, Miami had the lead entering halftime. The offense was going, and then they just couldn't do anything until late in the fourth quarter when they finally, started to play good football. Tua, one of the picks, was um wasn't on him, but the other two were on him. I mean, he continues to make mistakes that hurt this team, and I mean, he more than likely, at least Miami should consider moving on from him in the off season with just how bad he's performed so far. Like, he's had some good games, but for the most part, he's turned the ball over in every game, and he's costing Miami these wins. Like, yes, the defense um gave up all those points, and probably it can hang a lot of it on the defense. But if Tua doesn't make some of those turnovers, you know, if he doesn't, make the bad decisions he has through the first 6 games of the season, which is one of the reasons they are 1-5. Miami, could have a better record, but this is a lost season for the Dolphins. They're probably going to be picking top five and hopefully be getting a new franchise quarterback that hopefully can turn this team around and get them to, playoff status of being an AFC threat. Well, to the Browns at the Steelers, Pittsburgh. I wasn't that impressed by Pittsburgh just because, you know, I know Cleveland has a really good defense, but like it felt like this game was close throughout the first half. Like it felt like Pittsburgh never really took, their. It really felt like they took their foot off the gas pedal and let Cleveland keep this game close, and then they finally at the end in the second half started to make touchdown plays and were able to win this game comfortably. But I'm just not that huge. I think Pittsburgh will win the division just because of how bad the rest of the AFC North has looked so far. But they'll comfortably probably win this division, but I don't see much of anything. I think they'll probably lose in the wild card round to just a better team. And this is just not an impressive win for Pittsburgh. For Cleveland, I mean, Kevin Stefanski should be on the hot seat and maybe should be fired. I mean, it like the past 2 years, Cleveland just has not looked like it did the first 4 years of Stefanski's tenure with the Browns. Like from 2020 to 2023, two playoff appearances, but it felt like the Browns were more competitive than they had been in forever. And in the past 2 years, I know the QB play hasn't been great, but for a guy who's dubbed a offensive guru like Stefanski is supposed to be known as, Cleveland just has not been able to do it. They haven't even scored more than I think 17 points so far, which is crazy to say. But and it's just with more and more losses piling on. Dylan Gabriel didn't have the greatest game. It was against a very good Steelers defense, but I think maybe Stefanski at least should be considered with Cleveland continuing to lose these games and not being able to play great on offense when this defense is playing great football. Kind of like the defense is great, but the offense is holding them back. And maybe just an end of the year thing where they just move on from Stefanski and bring in a better coach that hopefully can get this talent, which there is talent on this offense if they get the right quarterback. Um, but struggling for Cleveland. Patriots at the Saints. And Drake May, he might have arrived. And thanks to Buffalo losing on Monday night, the Patriots are actually in first place for the first time since the 2021 season, I want to say. I think so. Yeah, since Mac Jones had his great rookie year, it felt like New England maybe was going to win that division. But Drake May has looked phenomenal. He makes play after play. He's looking like a for real deal NFL franchise QB with how well he's looked. And I mean, you just got to give credit to Josh McDaniels, to this offense. And I mean, this defense playing excellent football. They have been really turning it on the past couple of weeks. And I mean, early losses against the Raiders and Steelers felt like they could have won those games, but they're starting to figure it out. They have the Titans this upcoming week. Vrabel return to Tennessee. That should be a win. And hey, New England looking really good, and maybe for real deal AFC contender with how a lot of these, not just AFC but NFC teams haven't looked the greatest. Seems like a year where it's like an unexpected team could make a run. For the Saints, I mean, have they found their franchise QB post Drew Brees? Spencer Rattler has looked phenomenal. You know, I think a lot of people before the season were thinking Rattler wasn't going to be this good QB. The Saints were going to be horrible on offense. They've been really decent, and the Stevens has been playing pretty well, especially with Demario Davis playing out of his mind at 36. Um, but Spencer Rattler, if you look at the stats, it might not seem like he played that great, but he's been looking phenomenal. Outside of the Seattle game, which is kind of an outlier at this point because of how well New Orleans has played throughout the rest of the year. He's looked really good. You know, I know, yeah, everybody wants to pencil in the Saints for getting a first round quarterback next year, but hey, with the QBs in college not playing the greatest, and there's no real elite guy at the top, maybe the Saints could just say, hey, Rattler looked really good. Maybe if we build around him, he could be, you know, the franchise guy in New Orleans, and he could turn out to be a really good quarterback. And we'll just have to see, but he's playing really well. So is Drake May, and these are two young guys who, you know, maybe could be franchise guys for 10, 15 years for these teams. For Tennessee, Vegas, um, the Raiders finally looked good. It was against the Titans, so it's not like it's some great win, but and their 4 game losing streak, 2-4. These were the type of wins that I thought Vegas was gonna have, where it's like they were gonna use Genty more often. Was gonna have not as many pass attempts, and this team was going to win these types of games where it's like they just look like they're the better team. And it's good. It's a good win. They got the Chiefs next week. Division games are always tough, no matter how bad each team. No matter how bad either team is or how good either team is, they're always going to be close games. And I think Vegas could keep that game. I don't think they'll win it, but I think if the Raiders continue to play this football where it's like Gino doesn't have to throw that many passes and Genty's more the vocal point of the offense, and this defense plays out of its world. This could be a team where it's like later on in the year they could pull off some upsets and knock some team out of the playoffs. For Tennessee, I mean Brian Callahan gets fired 2 weeks, I think too late. I think they should have fired him really after last year with how bad they were. We'll see who they fire in the offseason, but it's looking more and more like they fired Mike Vrabel for no reason. Vrabel's a great coach. They fired him and brought in Brian Callahan because he's quote unquote offensive guru. He never really worked out as a coach, and it felt like that win last week was kind of like a desperation win that Callahan needed to keep his job. It came a little too late, but that's the fourth consecutive first overall rookie to have his coach fired. Trevor Lawrence in 21, Bryce Young in 2023, Caleb last year, now Cam Ward. it's really starting to think that like maybe teams should have the right coach when drafting a QB first overall, and not a guy who, especially the last 2 years with Callahan and Eberflus, two guys who probably should have been fired that offseason before, but the team kept them around because you know, they felt, hey, if we bring in the right quarterback, this guy will be a great coach. But it did not work out. And Tennessee doesn't look good. 1-5, probably going to finish with a top five pick at least. And it's moving on to the Niners at the Bucks, Tampa Bay. Mecca Ibuka going to be out for a significant time, which will hurt this offense. I mean, Tampa looks phenomenal. Baker looks great. And he was my preseason MVP candidate. I guess so far lived up to the bill with how well he's played. This Todd Bowles defense, a lot of people knock Todd Bowles saying, oh, Tampa Bay will never win the big ones because of Todd Bowles being the head coach, but they're having their best start in the Todd Bowles era at 5-1 with all the injuries they've had on the offensive and defensive side. They're 5-1. So give credit to Bowles, give credit to Baker and this team for being, you know, great despite all these injuries, despite all the adversity they felt. And 5-1, and they got the Lions next week, which will be a huge game to see if this Bucks team is for real. For the Niners, it might just be another lost year. Last year, all the injuries started to pile up as the season went along. Could not sustain it. Mac Jones did have the greatest game. Did have a decent game, but Fred Warner going to be out for the year. Another tough blow for a defense that's already without Nick Bosa. They lost so many guys in the off season and kind of relying on young guys, rookies, and other guys they drafted to really step up. But give credit to Kyle Shanahan. I mean, I feel like he should be in the Coach of the Year discussion with how well he's had this Niners team playing, despite all the injuries, despite all the things that have happened. It was apparently reported Brandon Ayuk hasn't been at the Niners facility in weeks, and he might not even play this year. Maybe that was because a lot of the Niners executives didn't really like the contract extension, and maybe Ayuk rather rehab this year, and the Niners, maybe move on from him after the season, and he's able to get a fresh start. But that's an interesting thing to watch. But 4-2 for the Niners. I mean, it's a lot better than I thought they would start off. So give credit to Kyle Shanahan and this coaching staff for being able to keep this team competitive despite all the injuries they've had. Moving on, Bengals at the Packers. Yeah, I feel like the score makes it seem the game was a lot closer than it was. Green Bay was the offense wasn't the greatest against a not so good Bengals defense, at least early on. They started to get it going, but Green Bay still very much concerns me with this team not looking as dominant as they did in the first 2 weeks, and maybe it's because of the offensive line injuries or the wide receiver injuries, but Packers have not looked like the greatest team since those first 2 weeks, and a lot of people crown them the NFC contender right there. I think they hold the fort with a good win, like 3-1-1. Win is a win. For the Bengals, I mean, this is more of the same of what I thought. I didn't think Joe Flacco was going to come in here and, you know, get a win like this. Like, I didn't think Flacco was going to help this team out. Like, the defense still isn't good, and Trey Henderson ended up missing the second half of the back injury, and that's something to monitor through the week. As they played Thursday against the Steelers. Um, but, I mean, Cincinnati didn't look great in the first half just like last week, kind of started to play great in the second half when the game was more so over with. And, this is a Bengals team that has now lost four straight, could lose five straight if they lose to Pittsburgh Thursday, it might just finally realize Zach Taylor needs to be fired. Now, I don't think a lot of people have talked about it because of Joe Burrow's injury, but I think Zach Taylor needs to be fired. He was brought in as one of the Sean McVay guys, being on the staff when the Rams made the Super Bowl. And I think everybody, just because of how good Burrow's been since his sophomore year, everybody's kind of just said, they'll be fine with Zach Taylor. But I think, with how, bad this Bengals team has looked since Joe Burrow got injured, I think it's kind of more so showing that they need to fire Zach Taylor. They need to fire the GM, who's apparently been there since the 90s. And they need to get a new regime and finally fix this team, because if they want any resemblance of, being a contender, they're going to have to fire Taylor. Sunday night, Lions at the Chiefs. Chiefs never say dead. I mean, last week against the Jags, up 14-0, blow the lead, come back, and then lose it at the end. I felt like this was a needed win game, and they got it. The defense came to play. The offense obviously always comes to play. Chiefs were 3-3. It came back in first place. They have the Bills in a couple of weeks, and Buffalo doesn't look like the greatest team. So maybe the Chiefs can start to get these wins going before the bye and really look like a the old Chiefs. For the Lions, I know they had a lot of injuries in the secondary, but this is a game where they had won four straight, going to Arrowhead with a chance to knock off the Chiefs, not only be 5-1, but drop the Chiefs to 2-4. This offense didn't get Jameer Gibbs going. I know they love to use Gibbs and Montgomery, and they love to use Sam Laporta, St. Brown, and JMO, and Tesla, who's looked phenomenal so far. But you got to get Gibbs, who's your best playmaker, going. And this Lions team, still very, very good, but for the Bucks team coming in, who's also banged up in so many spots, but are 5-1. If they lose that one and are 4-3, I don't want to say it's panic time, but I feel like they need to win that game to at least stay in the conversation of being one of the best teams in the league, because they got dominated by a Chiefs team that, for the most part, has not looked very much like the Chiefs that we've seen before. So it's very concerning for the Lions, and not a must-win game because they are 4-2. But I feel like a game that like they need to win to show that they are still very, very much a NFC contender. Around to Monday night, Bills at the Falcons, and I mean Atlanta, huge win. Apparently, it was the first time they have had a Monday night game at Mercedes-Benz Superdome since 2018, which was crazy to say. But this Atlanta team looked really good. They looked, you know, I mean, they were unstoppable in the first half. Buffalo's defense did start to clamp down on Penix and Bijan, but I mean, this defense looked tremendous against a very good Buffalo offense, who I know got banged up in the game, and you know they had on the bye, but 3-2. I mean, Atlanta, I feel like they are a sneaky playoff team with Michael Penix. If he plays, as well as he has the past couple of weeks, and he doesn't play as bad as he did against the Panthers, and this defense continues to get better, I feel like this Atlanta team could be a for real, at least wild card team, and maybe a future threat. Um, as this team gets better, as these guys are playing together more. For the Bills, a bye week is coming at the right time. Kind of same thing with the Ravens. I mean, maybe Buffalo isn't as good as we all thought they were, and it seems like there's no real great teams. Like, I know there are some teams who are 5-1, and like they do have one loss, but I feel like there's no real elite teams, which I feel like is a good thing because it means then it's kind of a wide open race to see who's going to get those top seeds in the AFC and NFC. You know, but Buffalo did not look good in the first half outside of the opening drive. Josh Allen once again, you know, kind of reverting back to pre Joe Barry, Joe Brady, not Joe Barry, Joe Brady, throwing turnovers, kind of trying to be Superman like he used to be when he was known as a turnover merchant. And they're 4-2. They get a nice season by and hopefully get some guys back. But this Bills team 4-2. Their 4 wins are against not really that great teams. Like even the Ravens don't look the greatest at 1-5. Miami, New Orleans, and a winless Jets team. The Bills, back to back weeks losing to 2024 QBs in May and Penix. We'll see how the Bills look off the bye, but they do not look like a real contender right now. And then finally, Bears at the Commanders. Give credit to Chicago. I feel like that's back-to-back games where old regimes like Matt Eberflus, Matt Nagy, even John Fox, I feel like they would have lost those types of games where it's close, but Chicago just ended up losing it. I feel like Ben Johnson really is turning this Bears um, team around by getting these huge type of wins where I feel like older regimes wouldn't have. You win you win the turnover battle 3-0. Now they didn't get many points off of those turnovers outside of the touchdown on the fumble by Bill Krosky Merritt, but it's just back-to-back wins. The Raiders win 2 weeks ago where they got the huge block, field goal on this one, getting the fumble by Jaden Daniels, and then Jake Moody. I mean, shout out Moody. Kind of thought it was a bust as a kicker, but he went 4 or 5 today. The one miss was just a low kick where Washington was just able to uh, block it and keep them with the lead. But give credit to Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, this Bears team. I feel like it's starting to turn into a for real deal team where it's like in a couple of years, once they get better on defense, young offensive players start taking strides. I feel like they could be a real contender for the North and even the NFC. For Washington, I mean, it's been an up and down year. 1 week they look like they're back to last year's Commanders. Another week they look like maybe they've taken a step back. They're 3-3. Very concerning. Um, I mean, it was good that they lost the turnover battle 3-0. This was still the game. I feel like usually if you lose the battle, turnover battle 3-0, usually the team that won it is usually up double digits. Give credit to Chicago's defense. I mean, Washington's defense for making plays, but it is very concerning that the Commanders 3-3. Now this NFC East, I think, is still up for grabs with how bad Phillies looked the past couple of weeks. But I feel like Washington hasn't played as well as they um were expected to, and it feels like 1 week they're good, 1 week they're bad. It's very confusing. But that'll be it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow for my mock draft 1.0. But until then, bye.